a teenager from the San Fernando Valley is torn between her boyfriend and a Hollywood punk. Filmmaker and author Kevin Smokler joins us to chat about a cheap music education, meaty roles for parents in teen movies, and different kinds of star-crossed lovers. Like, we're for sure gonna find out if Valley Girl stands the test of time.
Test of time, James and Alan have their say. Do the movies you love still hold up today? James says Gladiator with a glut. Alan says as a father, blah blah. It's the test of time, James and Alan have their say. Do the movies you love still hold up today? Test of time, James and Alan have their say. Do the movies you love still hold up today?
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a very special episode of The Test of Time. I'm James Brief, and joining me as always is Alan Noah. How are you doing, Al?
I am doing very well. I am very excited because we have a very, very special guest returning to the podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, it's Kevin Smokler.
Gentlemen, thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming back.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming back on the show. I looked it up before, and I am embarrassed. The last time you were here, Kevin, was 2017.
That seems very wrong. I would have guessed like 1971, but yeah, that seems very wrong.
That is a travesty. You were great back in 2017. I don't know what the hell is wrong with us that it took us so long. I mean, there was a pandemic and stuff in between there.
Oh, yes, that.
Right. But I was thinking, man, we got to have Kevin back on the podcast. And then you posted something on Facebook about Valley Girl, the movie we're going to talk about today. And I was like, okay, well, that's it. We've got to make this actually happen now. But we got to catch up because the last time you were here, 7 years ago, you had just written a book called Brat Pack America that had come out the previous year. Since then, you've made a documentary. So tell our listeners about Vinyl Nation.
In 2019, myself and my directing partner, Christopher Boone, shot a feature-length documentary film called Vinyl Nation, which is about the comeback of the vinyl record in America. We went to 14 cities throughout the United States and visited record stores and vinyl pressing plants and talked to musicians and bands and record label people and just ordinary folk, all about vinyl records and the importance this older yet returning technology had in their lives. We had an incredible time and we met all sorts of nice people. We managed to not bankrupt ourselves buying records, but it was close. And we finished the film like in February of 2020, which was horrible timing because the entire world shut down the next month. The best decision we made, which was Chris's idea, not mine, is he said, listen, Record Store Day is always the third week of April. And right now, all of our friends, all of the nice people we met who run record stores cannot open their doors on their busiest day of the year, busier than Christmas. Here's what we're going to do. We are going to let them sell tickets to see our movie digitally, $10 a ticket, and they are going to keep 100% of the profits. And
Whoa.
So we did that. And we basically got the word out. We had 250 record stores in 46 states participating.
Wow.
I mean, it was like the most amazing weekend of our lives. Chris was responsible for the tickets and all of the back end, and I was responsible for communicating with people on social media. And it essentially kept our movie from falling through a tear in the fabric of the earth and never being seen again. From that, we were able to get into several film festivals, many of which were virtual, but eventually became in-person festivals again. 57 film festivals on 4 continents all told. We won 9 awards as filmmakers, was picked up for distribution by 1090 Pictures, who specialized kind of in music documentaries. They did the Bluebird Cafe documentary, the Linda Ronstadt documentary, that kind of thing. We now own the movie again, and we have an international sales agent and some domestic distribution deals in place. And if you would like to see it, vinylnationfilm.com will list all of the platforms where it is available. We will never truly know what would have become of that movie had it not been finished the month before a worldwide pandemic. But given those terrible circumstances, everything kind of worked out. We feel like the best thing that happened was we made 1,500 friends we didn't know we had.
That's amazing. I love all of that. It's so funny that vinyl has become this analog status symbol in our super, super digital world. That's the only place people buy music now. Or not the only, but like really the main place where anyone buys anything other than, just streaming it and kind of renting it.
You're exactly right, Al. Vinyl overtook CDs in 2022, and it's been outselling it ever since, and probably will forever outsell it at this point. Yeah, there really is something truly to vinyl records. There's no one making a documentary about Cassette Nation and 8-Track Nation. It's just not something that's going to happen. And it's a fascinating thing for people that might not realize that vinyl came, went, but never really went away and outlasted all the other mediums that came and went.
That's absolutely true. We talk about in the movie that vinyl had the fallow period in between its initial reign and its comeback, the interregulum, to use a 10th grade European history word. And during that period, vinyl had the advantage of being the medium of choice for the hipper classes of music. The genres of music that maintained an interest in vinyl, and for different reasons, were punk, hip-hop, dance, and classical, and jazz. These are all, for the most part, genres that have either a certain cultural cachet or a certain intense dedication amongst their listeners.
Right.
And so that was fortunate for vinyl, that even though it was seen as completely passé by the time of our collective adolescence, statistically, the comeback of vinyl begins about 2008, and it is completely concurrent with the landing of the iPhone and streaming becoming something you can carry around in your pocket, and also the landing of Mad Men and the upswing in mid-century modern design and cultural cachet. And that happens at the same time as the change in corporate direction of Urban Outfitters and places like that. And pretty soon, a teenager's bedroom does not seem complete without twinkly lights, succulent plants, and a record player. And as James said, 2022, vinyl surpasses all other forms of physical music media, and that is now the primary way that people listen to music physically. Why do super mainstream artists release albums on vinyl? Some of it is purely capitalistic. You can charge $45 for a record in a way that you can't for a streaming album. But a lot of it is so your fans can have a thing that they can hold up to demonstrate their fandom. They can hang it on their wall. They can purchase it at the record store. Some of them wave them at concerts. It serves a lot of the same purpose that, say, a poster or a patch on a denim jacket served a generation ago. I don't happen to be someone who will argue whether X pressing or Y pressing is better. I'm not sophisticated enough to know these things. I just love that it gives you an excuse to go to the record store a lot. And if you have some discipline, which I have a little, but not much, but if you have some discipline, it is a very cheap way to learn about music. It's like going to music community college, like cheap unit price. And if you want to go into a good record store and be like, Romanian post-punk, what's the deal with that? Someone can be like, well, I got 3 import records I can pass along to you for $20 because nobody else wants them.
And it's not just $20, it's $20 forever, because something near and dear to my heart is, and Al and I talk about this a lot, is digital ownership versus physical ownership. Obviously, if your subscription to Spotify runs out, you don't have access to any of the music anymore. Or if you're out of range of a cell phone signal or Wi-Fi, you get no Spotify. Not only is it analog and you can keep it, but I feel like records from your parents' collection generally still work versus a CD that I used in the 90s. I've taken some of them out. Some of them work fine, some of them don't. I think in 100 years, my prediction is that there's going to be a lot more records that are working than CDs that are working and working CD players.
Yeah, the used record trade is a beautiful thing. The used record trade, by the way, is also a way to avoid the shenanigans that major labels do. But we still get emails from people in their 20s being like, what turntable should I buy? And what edition of Fleetwood Mac's Rumors should I buy? And all that kind of stuff. And the truth is, like, Warner Brothers will reissue Fleetwood Mac's Rumors as many times as you'll buy it. And it won't be different each time. It'll in fact be a little worse each time because they're probably cutting it from a digital master source and not the original analog source. But they'll charge you $45 for it every single time. And something like Fleetwood Mac's Rumors has 90 bazillion used copies out there in the world that one can find for $10 or less that were made from the original source and were not simply reissued to steal $45 from you.
So, now you tell me.
Yeah. So the temptation to buy new things, even with records, is just capitalism working its evil magic on all of us. The used record trade is a beautiful thing precisely because it allows us to purchase things at a reasonable price in still good condition that have a kind of amazing history, as James has indicated, and often still work. You know, like 35 years later, I have a bunch of my parents' records, and I'm like, you know, you open it up, and and there's a note from my dad in it, buy lettuce, you know, December 10th, 1967, stuck in the inside cover, you know, like, still works. It's great.
That's amazing.
The Voyager spacecraft, which is now outside of our solar system, has a record on it with a lot of sounds from Earth.
The re-release of the Voyager Golden Record on vinyl, which I think was 2018 or something, one of the like highlights of my life as an adult record owner. My wife and I were part of the Kickstarter campaign to make it happen. We have the box set they did, you know, the records on this beautiful gold, and it has a place of honor in our right above our turntable.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
And you are also making another movie, right? A short?
Chris and I have an idea for a short film. We're exploring this idea of doing a feature-length film about coffee and its role in shaping the American character.
Okay.
Coffee does not grow natively in America as an immigrant beverage that nonetheless had enormous influence on how we became an American nation. Coffee was the official beverage of the American Revolution in response to the Boston Tea Party. The North had coffee rations and the South did not during the Civil War. Of course, the role of coffee in civil rights sit-ins, the role of coffee in the revitalization of American cities in the 1990s. You better believe that Starbucks and Pete's had a huge role in that. We have a line on the only Native American-owned coffee shop in the state of Oregon, which is part of the growing Native American coffee roasting ecosystem. And we're developing the story of that coffee shop as a short film.
Amazing. And not only that, you're also working on another book as well, right?
Yeah, I finished. The other book is pretty much finished, is in edits, and will be out next spring from Oxford University Press, and is called Break the Frame, Conversations with Women Filmmakers, 25 interviews spanning the careers of 25 different women directors, many of whom made movies that you know and love. As importantly, we only noticed this after the book was done, many of the directors in this book launched the careers of people who became household names. Ryan Gosling's first Oscar nomination was a movie called Half Nelson, where he played a crack-addicted high school teacher, directed by a pair of directors named Anna Boden and Ryan Fleck, who later went on to direct Captain Marvel. Miss Boden was fortunate enough to spend some time with me talking about her career. The director who discovered America Ferrera and cast her in Real Women Have Curves, Patricia Cardoso, is in this book. The director Deborah Granick, who discovered Jennifer Lawrence when she was 17 and took her to her first Oscar nomination for a movie called Winter's Bone, is also in this book. One of my favorite things about the directors I got to speak to is how many performers became worldwide celebrities thanks to the initial work they did with these women directors.
That's amazing. And that leads us into the movie we're going to talk about, Valley Girl, because this movie was also directed by a woman, Martha Coolidge.
Yeah.
But James, why don't you tell us what Valley Girl is all about?
Sure. Valley Girl is a movie about the romance between Julie Richmond, a teenager from the San Fernando Valley, and Randy, a rebellious punk from Hollywood. Julie meets Randy after she breaks up with her preppy boyfriend, Tommy. Randy and Julie, they meet at a party and quickly fall for each other, despite Julie's suburban, mall-centric life and Randy's free-spirited nature. Julie's friends disapprove of Randy and pressure her to get back together with Tommy. Torn between her feelings for Randy and loyalty to her friends, Julie succumbs to peer pressure and dumps Randy. However, she soon realizes her mistake, and after a climactic showdown at the Valley High Prom, Julie and Randy's love triumphs.
Oh,
Yeah.
All right. So this movie came out in 1983. How did it do at the box office, James?
This movie opened on April 29th, 1983. I've seen anywhere from $350,000 budget up to $250,000 for the movie rights. Regardless, this film was a very low-budget film, and it opened at number 4 with $1.8 million, so well over its budget on its opening weekend. Number 1 was a 1984 film. 1983 film. Kevin, maybe you can figure this one out. It has a fantastic soundtrack. Specifically, this one's about dancing.
I feel like Flashdance is the answer, but like...
You're correct.
Oh, okay.
You're
For
correct.
some reason, I think a lot of the songs on the Flashdance soundtrack peak later on, which is why I thought Flashdance might have come out the following year.
Well, the number 2 film, I've never heard of this film, Something Wicked This Way Comes.
No.
And number 3, Al might know this, I've talked about this a lot, Until Titanic. This movie was the longest streak at number 1 in movie history.
Tootsie, right?
Yes, Tootsie. And then Valley Girl comes at number 4. But so it had $1.8 million on its opening weekend, but this thing made $17 million domestically.
Wow.
That's almost a 10 times multiplier. It just seems like this was a relatively big hit. It launched the career of Nicolas Cage and arguably Martha Coolidge as well.
Yeah. And as we start talking about the movie, I feel like the place where we should start with you, Kevin, is the soundtrack. You're a vinyl guy. You love music. And apparently there was not a release of the soundtrack album at the time when the movie came out. They were only able to put together like a mini album, and then that wasn't even really released. And then, one came out later in the 90s on CD. But the music in this movie, whether there's a soundtrack album or not, is pretty fucking epic, right?
It is, rightfully to some degree. We tend to give John Hughes kind of credit for creating the kind of soundtrack which was a mixtape, basically. Here are 10 songs selected for you because the director of this movie has exceptionally good taste.
Right.
That is a thing that John Hughes kind of perfected to the extent where he even had his own record label for a short period of time. But it is totally fair to say that Martha Coolidge did the same on Valley Girl the year before John Hughes's first movie as a director came out. Martha Coolidge was working on a documentary about the LA music scene at this time. She knew many of the venues and bands that are featured in Valley Girl. Valley Girl is responsible for the song I Melt With You by Modern English, which now is even bigger than the movie. Like, most people don't even remember that song was brought into our consciousness because of this movie. Now it is simply has been a staple of high school dances for 45 years or however long it's been. The band The Plimsolls, who are featured in this movie, were made famous because of Valley Girl. And I don't even know why it's in the movie, but there is an entire B story of Valley Girl about like one of the minor characters having an affair with an adult, and it's sort of totally tangential to the main love story of the movie. You don't even know really why it's in there. But part of that B story features a very obvious drop of a song called Monster of Love by the band Sparks. And a lot of people don't know who Sparks is. Sparks is a band's band. Every musician who has spent any time in Los Angeles, loves Sparks, and there was a great documentary by Edgar Wright a year or two ago about the band Sparks. Sparks is a Los Angeles band composed of two brothers that has been around for going on 50 years now, and is kind of responsible for this extremely catchy, extremely weird pop music. They were not recognized as the geniuses they were until very, very recently. And they show up very prominently in Valley Girl.
Right. Also, Angst in My Pants is another Sparks song that I think is earlier in the movie before that scene with the stepmom. And the Plimsolls not only are on the soundtrack, but they are playing in the bar when Randy and Julie, when they're first on their date. And then later on at prom, Josie Cotton, who's another influential LA musician at the time, she and her band are playing that one song that they play called Johnny, Are You Queer?
Yeah.
I had never heard that song. And while I was watching the movie, I was like, what the hell is this song? It's very bizarre. And I was reading about it today. Apparently, there are some people who consider that song homophobic and, did then at the time, 1983. And then others are kind of like, no, it's actually very empowering because the butt of the joke is the woman singing the song who thinks that if a guy isn't interested in her, that must mean that the guy is gay, which obviously is a ridiculous premise. So it's more tongue-in-cheek.
Yeah, I mean, it's really like there's kind of two kinds of soundtracks from movies from a long time ago. There are ones that are completely trapped in that moment in musical and cultural time, and we sort of listen to them and we go, oh, thank God we're not there anymore. How dated and embarrassing this seems. And we can argue what those soundtracks are. And then there are others that are like, yeah, this is definitely like Los Angeles in the early 1980s, but what a glorious time that was, and what great music was produced in that time, and look what it begat. Those are the kind of soundtracks that really live on.
Definitely.
The soundtrack definitely lives on. And sometimes I'm not as... I'll say I'm not. Maybe I'm not intelligent enough to pick up the fact that when I watch something like The Lion King, this is just Hamlet in another form. but in this film, there were two references that I thought hit you over the head. One was the Graduate one.
Yeah,
sure. The woman, the older woman that's trying to seduce the young man. She's like, "I got one tip for you. Plastics." And the final shot of the film seems very Graduate-like. But the other thing that this film references, and I see this in a lot of films, and it's just a classic thing to base a film on, is Romeo and Juliet, because this is the sort of rich girl, or rather two different classes of people, and a boy and a girl fall in love, and their friends are both kind of keeping them, that you shouldn't be with him, you shouldn't be with her. And what is a Valley Girl? Because I know there's a Valley accent. I don't know if it was kind of a good thing. Like, the Valley is the Valley of Los Angeles, I think. Yeah. Can you explain to what a Valley Girl is, please?
Geez, your East Coast roots are showing here, guys.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, for the record, I know the answer. But yes,
Sure.
Please go on, Kevin.
Okay. Technically, the valley refers to the San Fernando Valley, which is the over-the-hill first ring of suburbs to the north of Los Angeles. The Valley becomes the sort of cultural stand-in earlier than this movie, but really is most loudly becomes the cultural stand-in for the idea of the lame, second-rate, culturally deprived suburban facsimile of the real thing. And every city has an equivalent of this. You take the major urban area, and then you take the sort of rich, blanched out white area where the wannabes live. And that is the simulacrum of the thing called the Valley. Now, this is 40 years ago. The Valley right now, just like Oakland in San Francisco or Williamsburg in New York, is now essentially part of the metropolitan area because of how expensive and gentrified everything is. Sherman Oaks, where the Sherman Oaks Galleria is, the mall that is sort of the Vatican of Valley culture, or at least was at this time, is quoted in the song Valley Girl and is referred to a bunch in the book Less Than Zero. Sherman Oaks was on the other side of the moon from Los Angeles in 1982. It's pretty much Los Angeles now. It's not that much farther than like Park Slope from Manhattan.
Yeah.
But to answer the direct question you're asking, James, like a Valley Girl, and the phrase was around before the Frank Zappa song from 1982 that sort of kicked off the frenzy for the whole thing that this movie tried to capitalize on, was a kind of hyper-feminine, ditzy, airheaded cliche of a teenage girl from the Valley who is essentially content to live a life composed of materialism. And it is a sexist cliche, of course, but the cultural stereotype stuck around long, long after its peak, which was probably this movie. Clueless is a riff on the Valley Girl stereotype, and in fact inverts it because the main character in Clueless would never be caught dead in the Valley, even though all of her mannerisms are that of a Valley Girl. The Kardashians is a riff on the Valley Girl thing.
It's a thing that I think is really, really meaningful if you're there.
Yeah.
Like if you live in Hollywood, then you would not be caught dead in the Valley like Alicia Silverstone in Clueless. But I think for the rest of us, it's all Southern California. It's all Hollywood. What's the difference? I mean, I live on Long Island. I could go on and on and on about why Long Island is superior to New Jersey. I won't, don't worry. But like, to people in Alaska, they would think, what the hell are you talking about? It's all New York City suburbs. It's all the same. Like the bar that they go to in the movie Valley Girl, it's what is now the Viper Room.
It's no longer the Viper Room, but it became the Viper Room, yes.
Right, yes. What is more famously known as the Viper Room. That's like a 20-30 minute drive depending on where you are in the Valley. Like it's not worlds away, to your point, like the difference between Williamsburg and Manhattan, or even a more stark contrast would be he's from Williamsburg, she's from Staten Island. Okay, as a New Yorker, I get how those two places have very different cultures and are very different in a lot of ways. But I think this movie in particular doesn't do a great job of explaining why these two places are different. It's more about the perception that they're different, which is maybe the point, that,
so.
they're really not that different.
Absolutely. The Romeo and Juliet aspect of it is flimsy because nobody's getting killed over this. Like it's about teenagers, and maybe when you're a teenager, the worst thing you can imagine is the disapproval of your friends. So maybe the stakes are actually that high. But the movie is really about being comfortable with liking who you like and resisting the pressure to be someone else. And the movie acknowledges the difficulty of that when you're young. If there's anything like this movie is about, like with big capital letters, like emblazoned in pink neon, it's youth. Like this movie is about the trials and tribulations of being a young person and being attracted to and falling in love with someone who may not be a good fit with your friends. Like that's a struggle we all have, like as teenagers, even as adults.
Kevin, I want to ask you a line about from Brat Pack America. And I was wondering if you could explain this other piece of Los Angeles history that I never knew about, and really how divided the city was. But you write, Valley Girl is a movie that acknowledges a divided Los Angeles, even for teenagers, right before Los Angeles would tell the world that the Olympics had erased such divisions. This summer is the Olympics. It's in Paris, and the Olympics are such a major event. And you talk about how the Los Angeles Olympics really had the city been divided. That's how you start that chapter about Valley Girl.
Yeah, it's a really interesting coincidence that Valley Girl is a Romeo and Juliet story about a division that maybe existed, but it kind of depends on who you ask. Martha Coolidge, who came from the music industry. I don't think she ever worked in the music industry, but that was really her chief interest as a filmmaker at this time. Martha Coolidge knew very well that, like, the great successes of the Los Angeles music community are very much fueled by fans in the Valley taking themselves over the hill to music venues then in Hollywood, now more in places like Silver Lake, and being active participants. The band X, which is as, you know, at the time was as west and central Hollywood as they came, did not want their music on the Valley Girls soundtrack, even though Martha Coolidge asked, because they were afraid the movie would make fun of their fans from the Valley. They did not want it to be seen that they were sneering at the kids from places like Reseda and Woodland Hills coming to their shows.
Interesting.
4 years later, we get La Bamba in 1987, which was a movie about a famous musician from the Valley. Richie Valens was referred to as the Elvis of the Valley. And yet all of the songs were played on the La Bamba soundtrack by Los Lobos, who worshipped Richie Valens as school children, but were very proudly from East Los Angeles. We're not from the Valley. We're very much like city kids and proud of it. So this back and forth between the two places has always been part of Los Angeles music. And Martha Coolidge knew that. In terms of the divided Los Angeles referred to in this movie, a Romeo and Juliet story about a kid from one part of it and a kid from another part of it, Valley Girl comes out the year before the Los Angeles Olympics in 1984. Interesting timing as we speak here because the 2028 Olympics will be in Los Angeles. And the 84 Olympics were the Olympics that saved the enterprise of the Olympics altogether. The Olympics was on the verge of bankruptcy. Nobody wanted to host it. And if nobody wants to host the games, there are no games.
Yeah, you had written about how Montreal lost billions and then America had boycotted the 1980 Olympics famously because they were in Moscow.
Munich in 72.
The Olympics were horrible. They were just everything. Something horrible happened every 4 years and every city was losing money. So Los Angeles got it because you wrote in the book that no one else wanted it.
Pretty much. The reputation of the Olympics were in the sewer at this time. And it was the Los Angeles Olympics who said, we will do the games on time, on budget, and we will restore the dignity to the Olympics. And they did. It was a massive success in every respect, except for they essentially militarized the Los Angeles police and said to Daryl Gates, who ran the police department at that time, do whatever you want. And Daryl Gates moved giant pieces of armored military equipment into poor neighborhoods in Los Angeles and essentially held the working class citizens of Los Angeles under martial law for the duration of the Olympics. A horrible violation of civil rights.
Wow.
That is not talked about enough when discussing that Olympics, and was really a terrible chapter in the history of the city and led to the increasing militarization and fascist tendencies of the LAPD, which culminates 7 years later on March 3rd, 1991, in the early morning hours when the beating of Rodney King is caught on videotape.
Yeah, and a lot of people wouldn't really be thinking of that today. Yeah, giving some context, like, yeah, there were really things going on in Los Angeles that really were causing a lot of these divisions.
I'm so glad you mentioned, Alan, that scene that takes place at what was then the Central and then was the Viper Room after that. It's really the scene where we see Randy and Julie falling in love and where we realize that his ideas about her and her ideas about his are both wrong.
Yeah.
He says some gross cliche of where she comes from. She says, what's the big deal? I'm here with you now. And then they both realize that, is there anything more important than the fact that they like each other? Like, that's the point of that scene. All the other stuff keeping these two kids apart kind of falls away, and you realize these are just two kids that happen to like each other. So why is the rest of the movie making such a big deal about it? It's an incredibly courageous piece of filmmaking for the point when the two main characters to fall in love to question the very premise of the movie. But Martha Coolidge goes there.
It's really interesting that you say that, Kevin, because I did a little bit struggle with that in this movie, that there are these forces that are seemingly trying to pull these two apart. Why? Who gives a shit? Like, it doesn't
Yeah.
matter. And I speak from the perspective of a 44-year-old, and to me, these stories about teenage romances are always low stakes because, come on, what are the odds that this is really the love of your life? You're just young and horny, and shut up about it. It's fine. Like, it matters to you at the time, and that's great, and that's wonderful, but it's not the end of the world. And I think what you said earlier, Kevin, is really spot on, that what the movie is about is being with who you want to be with and not listening to these external factors. But I just didn't get why the friends were so adamant that she has to be with Tommy. Tommy is the right choice and Randy is the wrong choice. Why? Like, it seems so artificial, and I genuinely don't remember my Shakespeare. I hope my old high school teacher forgives me, but like, is it explained that the Montagues and Capulets have this terrible, terrible bad blood, and it goes back so long that, okay, we get why these families hate each other?
Yes.
Oh, they really explain that?
They basically set the stage. They don't say why. It is an ancient grudge. But you're right. They never quite explain why a Capulet is so bad for a Montague. But I think that's also kind of the point, maybe, of some of these Romeo and Juliet things. It's like they're generally always fighting for no good reason.
I agree. Yeah.
But then that kind of leads to my next question, which kind of relates back to something you said earlier, Kevin, about the friend, Susie and her stepmom, who are, kind of like rivals in love. And then Skip is flirting with the stepmom. And yeah, it's very reminiscent of The Graduate, like you were saying, James. But that story, to your point, Kevin, is dropped. It is completely meaningless. Nothing comes of it. There's also this situation where Lauren hooks up with Tommy after Tommy and Julie break up. And I kept waiting for that to come back into the story. When they go to that bar and they're on like this kind of double date, Stacy, the other friend, is there with the other guy from Hollywood, Fred, and they maybe are kind of sort of flirting. Like, she doesn't like him at first, but then maybe she's into it, and we're not so sure. I was expecting all of those plot threads to come back. And it seems like it could, in a very simple way, that would explain, the kind of why of this movie. Eventually, Julie should have the realization, hey, you're all telling me who I need to be with. What the fuck do you guys know about who to be with? Lauren, you hooked up with Tommy. Susie, you're dating a guy who wanted to bang your stepmom. Stacy, you really like Fred, and then you didn't hook up with him because you have this prejudice against people from Hollywood or whatever. Like, that could be the realization. That could be her turn. That could be how she learns her lesson. But none of that happens. And really, Julie just ultimately decides, I'm going to leave Tommy because there's a fist fight at the prom. Tommy loses the fight. And so, she's just like, okay, well, I guess I belong with Randy because Randy is better at punching Tommy. There's no realization. There's no lesson. And that really irked me at the end.
I do agree that just the fist fight was the real ending there, and he didn't get his comeuppance, or he didn't say something conceited first. It definitely could have, in my opinion, been a little bit more nuanced, and rather not a physical conquering of the bully.
Because with it just being a fist fight, what does Julie learn? Like, the lesson of not succumbing to peer pressure, sure, that's a great lesson. If that's the moral of the movie, cool, I'm into it. That means more to me than just following this love story. But yeah, she doesn't ever really learn that lesson, that her friends are wrong and that she's right. It just is kind of like a shrug at the end.
I think thematically the movie ends, or Julie learns her lesson a scene or two earlier in that conversation with her dad, where, the dad is like, listen, if I had paid attention to my stupid friends, I never would have met your mother, and like, you wouldn't be here.
Right.
The role of Julie's parents, by the way, is one of the most interesting choices in this movie. The fact that they are played by these sort of icons of 60s New Hollywood actors, Frederick Forrest, who you may recognize from Apocalypse Now, and Colleen Camp, who I think was also in Apocalypse Now.
Yeah.
And the fact that they like own some Ventura Boulevard health food store, and they're like Julie is not economically of the same class that where she lived represents. It's a very interesting twist on this movie. I accept what you're saying. I think Valley Girl is a very good example of a kind of movie that chooses an incredibly old-fashioned premise. And we can argue whether it's an interesting one or not. It's a serviceable one, but is it that interesting? And then just executes on it in an interesting way. And in a way where, because the premise is so archetypal, you could very easily just go through the motions and hit all your marks. And you'd probably get a movie that people would still come and watch. And I think this movie, which is a first film for pretty much everybody involved, supersedes the expectations of its premise remarkably. It's what I like best about it. It still feels fresh. It feels fresh, and it's over 40 years old, and it's made about this very particular moment in time, and yet it does not feel stale at all to me.
Yeah, to me, it reminds me of something Al said before, that teenage romances, they're mostly low stakes because they're probably not the love of your life. I remember Al and I reviewed a movie, I Can't Hardly Wait, and they get together. But the very last line of the film, there's a piece of text that says, they're still together. And, we didn't need to know that. I don't need to know, any of these movies are Better Off Dead or anyone that they're still together forever. I kind of like that, the idea that in this film was like, she knows that this guy Randy's better than Tommy. I think it says it's the junior prom, so I don't even know if they're necessarily seniors, but I mean, she's probably going to some college in a year, and Randy's probably not going to college, and I don't think it matters really. I don't think it has to end terribly. I just think they had a wonderful night. This guy's better than Tommy. She dumps the loser and gets with this guy now. It's okay. If these were two 30-year-olds, I think it'd be like, yeah, I mean, you're kind of hoping the 30-year-olds are at least going to give it a shot that this is a real thing. But I still think something better than a punch would have been better.
And Kevin, while you were talking about the parents, from a test of time perspective, something that kind of leapt out at me is when the dad is smoking pot in the bathroom and he's trying to hide it from everyone else, from his wife and daughter. He has to stuff the towel under the door, and he's opening up the window and blowing the smoke out. I couldn't help but think, from a test of time perspective, if he had a vape pen or a gummy or something, it would be a hell of a lot easier to just kind of sneak the pot. Although then the joke is in the next scene, the wife is like, hey, whatever you're on, I hope you save some for me. Ha ha ha.
I think if a parent smells like cotton candy scent coming out of a teenager's room, it's vape. Right?
I give this movie a lot of credit for creating interesting roles for parents in teen movies. Parents is a thankless role in a teen movie.
Sure.
And it was this movie before John Hughes did it that created really interesting things for the parents to do, and not simply like keep a seat warm until we can get back to the real central story involving the teenagers. I think it was a very inspired choice to have those two actors who were recognizable faces as the parents in this movie. And then to have them do something of significance, this completely sets the table for the best scene in 16 Candles a year later, when Molly Ringwald is sleeping on the couch and her dad, played by the immortal Paul Dooley, comes down, and they have perhaps the best dad-daughter moment in movie history. I say with a little bit of exaggeration, but I think as someone who spent entirely too much time with teen movies, the way the genre reaches its peak is if every character has three dimensions, even the ones that are not central or even necessary to the movie working. And this is one of them.
I think you make an excellent point, because I think of a film that wouldn't come out for another 15 years after this. American Pie launched the career of half a dozen kids. It was incredibly well received. I don't know if that film would have worked without the Eugene Levy character.
Not at all.
Who is, not just funny, but he has some warmth, he has some heart where he talks to his son, and that role maybe saves the film.
Yeah, the movie is useless without that role. He's in 3 scenes, maybe. But like, yeah, the movie absolutely does not work without that character. And there's great examples of that. Like the best movies of this time and of this genre have those characters. Pretty in Pink doesn't work without Annie Potts. Like it's not a parent character, but it's effectively like a surrogate mother character. We have no idea what's at stake for Molly Ringwald's character as a teenage girl without the Annie Potts character. Like, playing the parent in a teen movie became something that an actor of some note was willing or eager to do. I think in large part because of Valley Girl. I mean, maybe also later the John Hughes movies, but like Julia Stiles' dad in 10 Things I Hate About You is not some schlub from the Pasadena Playhouse. They got to say 3 lines like, why are you coming home so late? Or don't you know curfew is at 11 or something like that? No, it's Kevin Pollak, for God's sake. Like, yeah, this movie sort of elevated the role of the parents in the teen movie.
And Pollock was also the dad, and She's All That. And I think Al and I both noted he had some, good like heart-to-heart moments with Lainey Boggs.
Maybe I'm mixing it up. Maybe he was the dad in She's All That, and maybe Kevin Dunn, another great character actor, was the dad in 10 Things I Hate About You. But I remember the dad in 10 Things I Hate About You being someone you recognized.
Well, Kevin, let me ask you, what do you think about Valley Girl as a whole? Do you think the movie stands the test of time?
I mean, yes, of course. Like, I'm not sure we'd be talking about it if it didn't. And I always approach this question with a bit of trepidation because when you write a book about 80s teen movies and it's largely for people who are your age, what they all want to know is like, is it okay to show movie X, Y, or Z to my kids? I don't have kids, so I'm not a great source of information on that question. My answer is usually it's fine to show any movie to your kids so long as you're willing to talk about them before, during, and after. It's fine to show the Texas Chainsaw Massacre to your kids if you're willing to do that. But for this movie, I think if you approach it straight on, and if you're really literal about it, and you say, let's line up all of the Romeo and Juliet, 2 star-crossed teen lovers movie. Does this one work? Maybe not. I don't think that's the most interesting way to look at this movie. I think the most interesting way to look at this movie is this movie takes a very, very old genre, as old as Shakespeare for that matter, and in pretty much all the ways it could have relied on how serviceable the genre, and it could have just put itself on rails and rolled to the end 93 minutes later. I think it doesn't do any of that. It pushes itself and challenges itself pretty much every step of the way. And I think that makes it stand the test of time wonderfully. The other way, by the way, movies stand the test of time, and this may not be fair, is to look at what the people involved with it went on to do. Some of the actors became household names like Nicolas Cage, and some of them just became very, very interesting character actors. Michael Bowen, who plays Tommy, many, many years later, was Jesse Plemons' white supremacist uncle on Breaking Bad. was Jack Welker on Breaking Bad, and
wow.
So that's the kind of stuff I pay attention to. Like, does the movie exceed the expectations it sets for itself, and did it just let 1,000 flowers bloom and become really something that sent a lot of talented people in a lot of interesting directions? I think it did both of those beautifully.
Great. All right, so that's 1 vote for yes. James, what do you think?
This film, to me, I don't think it breaks any new ground, but it's a teen romance. It's got Nicolas Cage. He'll eventually be a legendary actor, but he's really good. I didn't realize this is his first film. I didn't think it was too long. Could they have cut some stuff? Probably. But, I think the film, it made me laugh. It's got a good soundtrack. It's well directed. And I'm glad I saw it. It didn't break any new ground for me, but it was just an 80s film I'd never seen, and it did everything well. So for me, it does stand the test of time. And I do want to say, no fault to you at all, Kevin. You did mix up one very funny Jewish comedian with another very funny Jewish comedian.
Tell me.
And so Kevin Pollak was the dad in She's All That. The dad in 10 Things I Hate About You is Larry Miller.
Oh, there you go. Thank you for reminding me. Yes, I knew the dad was some high wattage Jewish character actor, and I just didn't remember.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Larry Miller. That's two votes that stands the test of time. Al, what do you think? Does 1983's Valley Girl stand the test of time?
Well, there were some problems I had with the movie, and I explained, my big plot problems. Also, though, there's a lot of stuff in this movie that just feels really, really fucking creepy. And I don't know if that's a test of time thing or it was creepy back in 83 and no one really cared or bothered to worry about it. But when Randy goes back to the party and he's just hanging out in the bathroom for a really, really long time, waiting for the girl he likes to come into the bathroom so he can talk with her, like, that is creepy as hell. I mean, like, that is not an okay thing to do. They basically kidnap Stacy, who is saying, I do not want to go with you. And they're like, no, you're coming with us. The stepmom, you can call it a graduate-esque storyline, or you can just call her a pedophile. I mean, she is actively seducing a character who's supposed to be 16, 17 years old. At the end of the movie, everything Randy does as he's quote unquote trying to get Julie back is just stalking. Like, he is just following her around in a really, really creepy and unsettling way. So from a test of time perspective, that bothers me. But honestly, I think my bigger problem is that this movie is not timeless. This movie really is rubber stamped, or you know what? Make it more time appropriate. A giant neon sign that says 1983, and not even 1983, but also like 1983 Southern California. And to be clear, I don't think that's a bad thing. Like, I love the 80s. I love 80s culture. I'm into the Southern California music scene and all of that. So for me, seeing all of this stuff that is so very specific, I dig it. Like, I am really, really into it. I enjoy watching it. I enjoy hearing the affectations and the way they talk. I love looking at the fashion and the hairstyles and the furniture in the houses, like all of it. I'm into that. But I don't think this movie stands the test of time. I think it is very, very clearly a 1983 production in all manner of speaking. So I'm going to say no. But again, just to be really clear, I don't think that's an inherently negative thing. And honestly, I think that's kind of what I like best about the movie is its 1983-ness. Everything about it that is so 83 is why I like it. If it was a more vanilla, neutral movie with bland music and it could take place at any time in any part of the country, I might not have liked it as much. I think really what I liked about it is really most of all the music, but yeah, the 80s stuff is its charm, but I think it doesn't stand the test of time because of that. And Kevin, I'm really glad that you suggested this movie or that you wrote about it on Facebook and that we ended up talking about it. I'm very, very glad that I have seen this movie and that I know about this movie. So thank you for bringing this movie to my attention.
Oh, you're welcome. Always fun.
Always. One other thing that has nothing to do with the movie standing the test of time, but the friend Lauren is played by an actress named Elizabeth Daly. The second I saw her, I was like, oh my God, it's Dottie from Pee-wee's Big Adventure.
Sure is.
I can't think of any other movies that I recognize her from, but I've seen Pee-wee's Big Adventure a gazillion times. So that's how I know her.
I know her from one other film, and we saw her in another film, and we go, oh, look, there's Dottie. She is in one of the bands, and I think it might be Back to School. She might be in one of those bands. Oh, no. She's in the band Better Off Dead that the prom goes to at the very end. Yeah, that's it.
Amazing.
Oh, okay. I didn't know this, but I was looking her up before. She's also the voice of Tommy Pickles in Rugrats.
Beautiful.
Yeah, so she's probably super duper rich, and good for her. Rugrats is still popular.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, Kevin, thank you again for joining us. We have to have you back on the show with a shorter than 7-year gap. Two of the movies you mentioned earlier, Half Nelson and Real Women Have Curves, maybe those would be appropriate when the book comes out?
Certainly.
Okay. Those movies, any movie, anytime, you let us know. You have an open invitation. We love having you on the show.
Oh, you're welcome anytime. Come back soon.
Thanks, guys. Love being here, and I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. Well, that's going to do it for us this week. Next week, we are going to be talking about Garden State, a movie that is celebrating its 20th anniversary. We hope you tune in for that episode. Until then, we want you to write to us. We are at Test of Time Pod on Facebook, X, Instagram, and Threads. Let us know your thoughts on Valley Girl, on The Valley, on being like totally for sure or like whatever, you know. And we'll see you next time, everybody.
Bye.